Crimson Desert is an open world action adventure game that I have been really excited about since its initial reveal trailer. Since then, IGN First has really gotten the exclusives. They've been able to share with us different boss battles, a layout of the terrain, a little bit of the storyline. And I gotta say, I don't like wrestling at all, but Crimson Desert and Pearl Abyss somehow managed to make me love it. This game really encompasses a little bit of everything. This is a reaction video, so I'll leave the video from IGN First down in the description, but just be aware that I will be pausing it throughout to share my thoughts. Let's get started.
It has been almost 6 years since Crimson Desert was first revealed to the world. Across that period, developer
6
Pearl Abyss
years
showed
already?
a huge array of ideas, mechanics, and boss battles. It's frequently been cited as something of an everything game. An open-world adventure with sky islands, mechanical dragons, wrestling moves, interdimensional gateways, interacting elemental effects, and even a Spider-Man web swing. But the more that's been revealed, the more there's been the sense that Crimson Desert may be a lot of pieces in need of a whole. Finding that complete picture was my main objective when I visited Pearl Abyss's studio in Seoul for this month's IGN.
I'm so jealous.
I can't say I found it yet. Multiple hours of hands-on playtime has revealed a game that's maybe not as strange as you'd expect. In fact, Crimson Desert feels pretty straightforward. Pearl Abyss has crafted a reasonably traditional open-world adventure, made up of multiple regions peppered with towns, outposts, and castles. There's the usual collection of main and optional quests, plus classic distractions like fishing. You'd be forgiven for not realizing this though. Pearl Abyss has put almost all of its promotional efforts into showcasing boss fights. Not only that, but Crimson Desert's blend of traditional medieval fantasy with sci-fi and steampunk elements does make it seem like it's been pulled in several directions at once.
True.
In order to destroy such weapons, you'll need to acquire golden stars. So cool, golden star.
When you're on the ground and seeing how all these elements interact though, it doesn't feel quite so alien. The continent of Pywell is perhaps less like a typical Tolkien-esque fantasy world and more akin to Dungeons & Dragons, a setting that, in recent years, was host to a Mad Max-like vehicular chase through hell. Pearl Abyss's design team explained that they wanted Pywell to reflect the variety of our reality, in which some countries feel much more futuristic than others, and note that some of Pywell's leaders may be more resistant to the advancement of technology than others, a conflict that'll be explored through various faction quests. All this means that the variety doesn't feel artificial or there simply for the sake of being wild, even when you're at the controls of a flying battle robot, which was, of course, designed by Dwarven engineers. The inclusion of these mechanized and steampunk elements grant Pearl Abyss the creative license to build quests that are a significant departure from anything we'd see in something like Skyrim. A major part of my hands-on time involved completing a quest for Marnie, a scientific genius who cloned his own consciousness to create an AI-like entity called Soul. Naturally, the results of such an experiment have gone very wrong, and Marnie's evil digital magic twin has taken command of a flying fortress that's terrorizing Pywell's skies. Defeating Hall requires the use of a power core, which Marnie reveals is hidden inside a weapon called Golden Star. And by weapon, he means a giant mechanical dragon. While they presumably have ballistic missiles in Pywell, what with the advanced engineering and all, of course the fantasy version of a nuke is flying Mechagodzilla. All that stands between me and this winged menace is a fortress filled with angry battle robots.
You detect it.
So one of the things I know when it comes to open world games, a couple things come to my mind is how are the interactions going to be, especially with the smaller creatures. I'll give you an example. Dragon's Dogma 2, that really annoyed me. One was the amount of reoccurring monsters that we would get. And then 2 is just how we are going to traverse in the terrain. Is there going to be a bunch of nothing or is there too much of something? So I think it's really hard with open world games, finding that balance between the two. But does flying a dragon fix that problem? And I feel like if the world is big enough, my answer would be yes. And like he said, you have this Spider-Man-like ability where you can swing going through. And I don't know how long you have that ability before you get to just ride around on a dragon. But it just seems like if we're able to move through the terrain at a good pace, then that feeling of us having not a lot in between our boss battles or just regular creature battles, it can really alleviate a lot of that. So we'll see, right?
No time to.
It appears that fortress assaults will be a significant recurring objective in Crimson Desert, considering that my hands-on time involved no fewer than 3 of them. I can see why Pearl Abyss was keen to show them off, as they are a showcase for some of the project's strongest achievements. There's a great sense of atmosphere, with a legion of men from either side battling the living hell out of each other, and you're caught in the middle of it all. Fun mechanical wrinkles add texture. During one attack, I was able to fire signaling arrows that were quickly followed by a bombardment of artillery, decimating enemy soldiers and reducing buildings to splinters. In another, I was able to circumnavigate the brutal
looks really good.
Sneaking into the castle through a crumbling wall and using the prison as a shortcut to the boss. And in my fight through the robot fortress, a backpack-mounted EMP device allowed me to fry the circuits of both the lumbering ground threats and airborne bug bots in one giant blast. There's always something new to try, something to experiment with. But as much as these fortress assaults are a demonstration of Crimson Desert's highs, they also simultaneously reveal what could turn out to be some of its biggest blemishes. Battling masses of enemies is surprisingly tedious, feeling messy and repetitive rather than an engaging chain of frontline fights. An awkward lock-on feature pushed me away from one-on-one duels into a more freeform playstyle, but that came with the baggage of imprecise strikes and occasionally kicking the air instead of faces. Absolutely none of these issues hamper the boss battles, which was my only experience of Crimson Desert prior to this demonstration, and I was quite surprised at how different combat can feel in alternative scenarios, even when using the same moveset. It's in these smaller, less refined details where Crimson Desert threatens to lose itself.
So no lock-on capability?
There are occasions where you need to pick up and manipulate objects, such as planting a banner to inspire your allies. Doing so requires standing still, turning to face the object, activating a focus mode, rapidly tapping a button to lift your target, and then finally using your telekinetic powers to manually move it. All of this is a slightly baffling annoyance when erecting flags, but it turns into a genuine frustration in the middle of a boss battle, when you're desperately trying to swing a fallen masonry column during the precious few seconds when the boss is stunned. Thankfully, no such awkward ultra-hand juggling is required to extract the power core from Golden Star. As we explored earlier this month in our making of feature, this is a boss fight with a unique mechanic that must be discovered in the quite literal heat of battle. The dragon's flaming breath activates an array of pylons dotted around the arena, which then dispense EMP bombs that you can fire from an arm-mounted cannon. The system creates a repeating phase loop. Golden Star circles above, belching the flames that produce the EMP bombs that will eventually bring him crashing to the ground, where you can unleash a barrage of strikes until he reboots and begins the cycle anew. Pearl Abyss are keen to point out that you don't have to do this. You could, for instance, use lightning-reefed arrows to apply a stun, or simply chip away at his health bar with ranged attacks.
That's dope.
The real enjoyment in all of Crimson Desert's boss fights have been finding the unique mechanic built into the arena or even the enemy itself. Bosses are not the only thing in need of conquering.
Okay, hold on. I think that's a really good feature to have. My buddy Blasphemy, one of the things that he's really into Zelda Breath of the Wild, and that was one of the things that he mentioned, just going into the dungeons or just simply fighting bosses and having multiple ways to solve puzzles or to face off against enemies. I think that just adds another layer of freedom, and I really enjoy that when it comes to these games. You don't really feel tied to the game forcing you in a certain direction. I wonder how they're going to do it with storyline. I'm sure they're going to cover it in here, but choosing the different storylines doesn't matter in the end. We'll see. Hopefully they cover that. If not, that's something I'm going to have to look up.
Suspended high above Pywall are a scattering of abyss.
I haven't seen anything wrong.
Accessed through portals that are unlocked with mysterious abyss artifacts. These islands appear to come in multiple guises. Last year we saw that one of them is home to an alchemist called Alastin and his Library of Providence. And my hands-on session included one that was more akin to Zelda's puzzle shrines. Its checkerboard floor was essentially a room-sized circuit board in need of a total rewiring. And finding the correct path through the grid of rotating flagstones unlocks the island's treasure trove. This is, of course, the sort of puzzle you've solved in everything from Watch Dogs to Bioshock, but I enjoyed how your equipment is integral to completing it. Your lantern illuminates the correct pathway, and your grapple hook is used to spin each tile. So while this challenge is not particularly taxing, I hope its solid foundations are the basis for more interesting puzzles that await among the clouds. When you've uncovered an Abyss Island's secrets, you can leap off the side and float down to Earth, where plenty more traditional open-world fare awaits. There are towns to visit, in which you'll find shopkeepers to trade with and bounties to take on. Out in the wilderness, there are camps to clear out and roaming barbarians to slaughter. And then there's the factions. From what I glimpse in the menus, there are dozens and dozens of them, although some will be more important than others, I'm told. A few have their own quest lines, such as House Wells, a family of nobles led by a duke who's lost his castle to rebel forces, a situation that's the catalyst for one of those aforementioned fortress assaults. Pearl Abyss was quick to clarify that these groups are not like Fallout's factions, and allegiances with them won't change the course of the story or impact Crimson Desert's ending, which is set in stone. And so I'm left wondering, what are the faction quests in aid of? When asked, Pearl Abyss's design team explained that they were there to ensure that the factions felt like significant actors in the plot, and that they offered more content for players to complete. That considered, I am a little apprehensive that at least some of Crimson Desert's offerings will be stuff to do rather than meaningful interlinked opportunities.
I agree with him. I love this guy. This is a fantastic video, but I definitely share a sentiment with that. I like that you have the option to do these additional faction missions and it can add to the overall arc of the story. That does make sense to me. And if I'm going to play a game like this, I want to get as much as I can out of it. Hopefully, there's good loot, maybe additional items and weapons. I mean, who knows? But it does kind of suck the fact that it doesn't take the story in a different direction. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Once again, leave a comment down below.
That brings us back to my very first question. What is Crimson Desert as a whole? I know it's a vast open world with deep, fighting game-inspired combat that works better against bosses than it does against fodder. It's got spectacle-laden quests that take you from in-the-mud castle assaults all the way up to aerial dogfights. And it's littered with good-time distractions, from fishing and bounties to taming bears and buckling up in a battle mech. But I'm still waiting to discover the glue between all this that elevates an open world to new heights.
That's fair.
Shadow of Mordor has the Nemesis system, which chains its enemies together into a foe-conquering big picture. Red Dead Redemption 2's systems are united by a pursuit of realism and authenticity that makes its campaign feel like a life lived rather than a game played. And this year's Ghost of Yotai links every activity on its map to a new unlock on your skill tree, ensuring even little diversions are a growth opportunity. That's the stuff that's so far been missing from Crimson Desert's demonstrations, and the thing I hope will eventually be revealed when I get to play multiple consecutive hours rather than a collection of isolated quests and bosses. Without it, I still think Crimson Desert stands a solid chance at being an overall good time, but with it, it could become something much more special. For more from Crimson Desert, check out our combat explainer and our showcase of every boss battle revealed so far.
That's a fair assessment, but it's so early on where we are and really how much IGN, from what it sounds like, has been able to play with this game. So once again, I think it makes sense to say, hey, we've been able to fight these bosses, right? We've faced what seems to be a bunch of creatures that gets a little annoying over time. I'm sure they've had a couple abilities that they were able to play with as well. But yeah, I mean, when you're really not traversing from one boss to the next, and you're not really seeing the glue, right, that really is making the story really unfold, it makes sense. So fair. I do think there's so much to this game that is kind of a worry of mine. And I said that when I first saw the reveal once again. And me and my buddy were talking about this game over and over again. My hope is that with this game, it's not doing so many things that with those many things, they don't do them very good. Whereas maybe bringing that down a little bit and making something your main focus and doing it very well. On that note, click on the screen. That'll take you to more videos for Crimson Desert. I'll link our entire playlist that we have so far, which includes different which includes different boss battles and everything else. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace. What am I? Idiot.